joining me now is Mutooni from Sanlam Investments to share his analysis on the day's market performance. Roy, thanks so much for your time today. So those reciprocal tariffs, as mentioned, coming into effect today, markets seem to have priced everything in, moving right along with most equities in the green today. Even here at home, we see the JSE above that 100,000 point mark again. I'm surprised that the Rand is trading stronger though, because you'd expect that to perhaps be on the back foot. What's going on there? I mean, we did hear of a phone call between President Trump and President Ramaphosa. Is that what easing concerns?
Hi, thanks for having me. Look, I think it's multifaceted. The Rand right now is probably being driven by two big things. And I think the bigger one, which is completely understated, is the terms of trade. The fact that these commodity prices are rising this much between gold and platinum and a weaker oil price, that just makes that just puts a very strong underpin to the Rand. And when you combine that with the marginally weaker dollar, that's more Rand strength that comes in. And that's why I think you're seeing it bat away all of the negative news that comes through. Maybe the discussion with the Trump presidency might help from a sentiment perspective, but I think on a flow basis, it's predominantly terms of trade and the dollar that are influencing where the Rand stays.
All right, let's move over to some company news. Apple really doing whatever it can to somewhat please the Trump administration, recently announcing an investment worth $100 billion following that pledge it made earlier this year. Just going through what the funds will be used for, it seems like it's mostly components for its devices. Is it safe to say then that iPhones will continue to be assembled outside of America?
Look, I think the big lesson from this is to understand that despite what we may think or what perception we have about what is rational and irrational, I think this whole process has made His Excellency Trump a whole lot more powerful. Nobody's opposing him. Everybody has basically figured it's better to fall in line than to fight. And he's getting what he wants. Remember, the whole point of tariffs, the bottom line of tariffs is you want to move manufacturing back to the U.S. in some way, shape, or form, to increase investment in the U.S. And when you see big companies such as these, such as Apple, which would have lobbied aggressively, which would have had a big presence in the Senate and places like that, coming in and talking about these big numbers, then you know, politically speaking, he's not weakened. He's definitely stronger. And it doesn't help you to go against the tide. Yeah,
and talking about those trade policies, SAPI under pressure on the back of the uncertainty brought by the tariffs, the group recording a loss for the second straight quarter. Is this one of those counters, Roy, that really depends on some sort of calm, some sort of certainty when it comes to the global economic picture?
I think SAPI is more a counter that depends on global growth and an improvement in global growth. And that's not been happening. Actually, what you've seen is all forecasts for global growth have been downgraded from the beginning of this year. Remember, they're in an industry that suffers from excess capacity. They're trying to cut back on that capacity, reconvert it, repurpose it. So operationally, they're in a difficult position as it is. And then their primary markets are seeing lower and lower prices and lower demand for their products. So I think it's more than needing calm. They need to see growth. They need to see things moving around across the world. So this is just a trend line that seems to keep going. The good thing is, at least I think the balance sheet is still fine. And hopefully they can fight another day.
And you know, despite TFG recording good results, the group also warning of the ripple effect those tariffs could have on the economy and then further weighing on consumers' purchasing power. Is that forecast what has pushed TFG's share price so low? I see it was down 7%.
No, I think the numbers were quite weak. In their outlook, they said Our first quarter was difficult, excluding the acquisition, and we think the first half is also going to be hard. So I think that's the market recalibrating the fact that consumer demand across all of the primary markets has not been that strong.
Yeah.
Consumer confidence is not improving, and what you probably have is a whole lot more discounting, which could hurt margins. So I think this is one of the ones that investors liked listed, one of the apparel retailers listed on the stock exchange here. And I guess what you've seen is basically a recalibration and an expectation of earnings not being aggressively up for the first half or for the balance of the year.
Advitech, in the meantime, expanding its reach in East Africa and acquiring a school out in Kenya. This, of course, part of its strategy to further, increase its exposure and become a big player in the private education scene across the continent. Let's just get your analysis on this move.
So they've been very successful with the acquisition of the Mutooni group of schools in Kenya, and this is just building onto that experience. Runda is a very upmarket, fast-growing area in Nairobi, so their captive market there will be quite good. They already have a very solid reputation as it is, and I think the way they've rolled out that Mutooni group of schools and restructured it and introduced their own competencies just means they have a solid reputation. So I think it's not too expensive. I think they've tapped into a growth market there, and they seem to know what they're doing. So I think it should be positive for the group over the medium term.
All right, let's hit pause on the conversation, Roy. Before we get to your stock pick, let's take a moment to touch on what counters your industry peers are watching closely.
One of these recently reporting stocks that suffered a severe sell-off. Again, it's a materials business. They're exposed to effectively a commoditized product, and we believe this is bottom of the cycle. Mondi really lost a lot of its blue chip status in the wake of the war in Ukraine, and losing some of its highest margin business inside of Russia. And subsequent to that, has had to reposition and restructure against the backdrop of a softening price in a lot of their products. However, it does look like that market is bottoming out. Corrugated, recycled, both have started recovering nicely. Mondi is still a top quartile producer in terms of cost to output. So from that perspective, and the fact that we expect it to start de-gearing, which always adds that nice little kicker to the end of your results. When HEPS looks a lot better than operating profit growth, we believe at the current valuation, this is quite a nice entry point to get back into Mondi.
Why Valterra? Now Valterra is sort of, I still believe, a great entry point into your PGMs. When you look at the likes of Sibanye, now remember they came off a horrible 2024. They're looking at a year-to-date growth of 162%. That's since the 1st of January 2025 up to yesterday's close, 162%. Northern Platinum, we're looking at 122%. Even Impala Platinum, 94%. While the likes of Valterra, only 58% year-to-date performance. I say that only, but remember they had a very bad 2024. Now the reason for that, let's call it lagging, they other counterparts, it's not because things are going badly. Yes, their production is somewhat softer, but they are looking really well positioned. The quality of the precious metals are really very, very good, well managed. And it's the only reason was, remember, Valterra was that spin-off out of the Anglo Gold, so massive hangover of stock. So I think there's still an opportunity there. It's still, let's call it lagging 30% to Impala Platinum, and it's definitely not an inferior company, or let's call it superior company.
So Valterra and Mondi, are these companies that you like?
So if I start with Mondi, I think Mondi is a very high quality business that, well, it's basically struggled, like the commentator said, since the breakout of the Ukraine war. They had to get rid of the Russian assets. It seems to me that it's at somewhere near the bottom of its cycle. Very similar to Sappi, they need global growth. because remember they make corrugated boxes and the like, and that benefits very well when people are sending things across the world, when commerce is growing, when e-commerce is growing, when GDP growth is expanding. So it seems to me that at this point in the cycle, they're probably somewhere at the bottom. It's probably as cheap as it gets, but I think it's going to take a little bit longer for it to start seeing some upside. People need to see some improvement in the trade environment, some increase in trade volumes before they start investing in stocks like these. Valterra, they can only benefit from now becoming independent from the Anglo Group. They've got a great set of platinum assets, low cost. They're going to have a reasonably solid balance sheet. And they're going into a period where platinum prices are basically quite strong. So I think that's one definitely to keep watching. The one caveat there is around the placement that Anglo Group will probably make with the remaining shareholding. That may weigh a little bit on the shares, but for a long-term patient investor, I would say this would not be a bad place. It would not be a bad place to hide.
And where are you seeing opportunity? What's your stock pick, Roy?
My stock pick is MTN. I know MTN's rallied quite significantly, but just looking at the trading update this morning and also looking at how the Ghanaian and the Nigerian businesses did, I think there's still a little bit more to go. I think when they do report the group results, you'll probably see places like Uganda, Cameroon, and Cote d'Ivoire also improving. All of these African economies benefiting from declining inflation and the fact that their currencies have already devalued, and then growing demand for data over the future. Remember, they still have the fintech business which they need to find a price for, and they're making significant progress on. So I think for all of that, the current trading multiple is not stretched at all. And investors, again, patient investors should see some continued upside over the medium term for that stock.
All right, let's leave it there, Roy. Thanks so much for your time and sharing your insights with us at midday. That was Roy Mutooni from Sanlam Investments.